So we saw that errors are categorized. So every error has an error code, right? And each error code comes under a particular category called SQL state. And all exceptions are subdivisions of what is called a null exception, right? So all exceptions come under this category. Then each category of SQL state might have multiple error codes under that, right? So the second SQL state would have multiple error codes. So we saw 1143, 1144, 1145. 1146 was under a different SQL state. Right, and in general, every exception comes under the exception category, right? So you can declare some action, right? So this action can be either continue or exit, right? Handler for, you can give an error code, right? So for an error code or SQL state or SQL exception, right? You can say declare handler for 1146, or you can say declare some continue handler for SQL state 42S02. Or you can say declare continue handler for SQL exception, right? And then here you have your begin and end. And what you need to do if that particular error is raised is written within this. So if so, how does MySQL look for this? So whenever an error is raised, it will search, is there a handler to handle the exception? If it is there, it will go into that, right? If it is not there, it will search, is there a handler to handle the corresponding SQL state, right? If it is there, it will go into that and it will be executed. And if SQL state is also not there, it will search, is there a handler to handle generally any exception? If none of these are there, then it will throw an error, right? As usual, it will throw an error and stop executing. Okay. So if I have declared a handler for SQL state 44200, right? Then it means 42000, right? So let us say I have not defined any handler for any error code. So in that case, what will happen is if any of these exceptions are raised, if 1143 is raised, it will search, is there a handler for 1143? It's not there, right? But there is a handler for 4200. So it will come here. Similarly, if 1144 is raised, we don't have a handler for that, but there is a handler written for this. So this handler can handle this error also, right? So this handler can handle all three errors. Okay. And SQL exception can handle any error. Any error that is raised can be handled by your SQL exception, right? So this is how your exception handling works. So now we had written a stored procedure to calculate the grade of people, right? So here we have written a stored procedure where we are taking the mark, and if the mark is within a specific range, we specify the grade, right? Whether they are distinction, first class, second class, or failed. What if I want to do this? So let's say I have a table called marks, right? So we had created a table called marks, I think. Or no, we didn't create. But let's say there is a table called marks like this. Let me. Okay. So I have a table like this where I have the name of a student and the corresponding mark. What if I want to do this for every student? Right? I have to take Tom's record and decide what is his grade. Then I want to take John's record and I have to decide what is his grade. I have to take Tim's record, decide what is the grade. How will you do this? Can you tell me how you can do this?
By ranking.
That is fine. We have the logic to do that. Right. So we have the using stored procedures and the code that we have written. Right. So we have already written this logic error set. See, this part we have already written. Only thing is now what I want to take every record from the marks table, and for each record, what is this value, right? So because every record has a mark in it, for that mark, what is the grade? How can I do that? Can you give me an idea of how we can do this? How can we do? Yeah, tell me. I want that logic to be applied for each and every record in this table. What can we do? Take this record, execute this code. Take this record, execute this code. Take this record, execute this code. How can I do this automatically? No suggestions? What can we do? You got the...
Can we pass mark as a parameter?
You can do that, but then what you will have to do from here, how will you pass the mark as the parameter? Because you will have to look at it and manually take that 67 and put it, right? You will have to say grades, call grades, and then 67, then again call grade 73. But then how do we get the 67, 73 and all? We are just looking at it and we will have to pass it ourselves, right? So another option would be, can I select marks here?
Yes, it's a local.
Select marks, mark from marks. Okay. But then what will we do? What will happen when I say select mark from marks? All the marks will be selected, right? So if I say select mark But what we need is we need to take this out one by one, right? So to do that, we need a special type of variable, because you can see what the issue is, right? So what we want to do, we cannot achieve without the help of some special type of variable, and that is what we call a cursor variable. So a cursor variable can hold the result of, see, I can say select mark into marks. I can't say that, right? I can't create a local variable and say select mark into some local mark, because it's not a single value, because it's going to return a list of values. So I can't put it into a single variable. So I need a special type of variable which can hold the result of a select, right? If it is one value, right? If I say where name is equal to Tom or something, then fine, I can put it in a local variable, right? But then how about the other people, John, Tim, Jim, and all? Every time I'll have to write this, put it into local mark. And if local mark is greater than this, I have to do that, right? So what we need is a special type of variable which can store the result of a select command. When it is returning more than one records, right? More than one record, you need a special type of variable. So that variable is what we call a cursor variable. So a cursor variable is used to hold the result of a select command, right? And more importantly, the cursor variable is iterable. Iterable means you can go over the elements one by one, right? You can take elements out of this one by one. So here what I have to do is I'll declare a variable. I will call it myCur of type cursor. How will you declare a variable generally? How do you declare a local variable? Declare X integer, right? So this is what we are doing here. Declare variable name. What is the type of the variable, right? So here what we have is a variable of type cursor, right? So we have declared a variable called myCur, which is of type cursor, right? Which is similar to saying declare a variable X of type integer. Then you have to say for what is the select command, right? This is used to hold the result of a select. So what is the select command? For in our case, we will say select. Let's select name also. Name, comma, mark from marks, right? Now what will happen is we have a variable called myCur. We have a variable called myCur, and inside that variable, you will have name and marks. So you will have Tom, Tim, and John. Let's say only 3 records are there in the table, right? So this is what you will have inside the cursor variable. This select will be executed, right? So the result of it will be put into a variable of type cursor, and we have given it a name myCur. No underscore myCur. And we said this is iterable, which means I can take out elements one by one from this, right? So how do we do this? So there are certain steps to follow, right? Step 1 is to declare the cursor. Declare the cursor. Step 2, open the cursor. So how do we do this? We'll just say open MySQL, right? So when you do this, a pointer will be placed here, right? Let me use a different color. A pointer will be placed at the very first record within the cursor. Okay. Now you can read from the cursor. So step 3, read from the cursor. How do we read from the cursor? We use the fetch command, right? So we will say fetch MySQL into some local variables, right? So we have selected name and mark. Name and mark is what is there in the cursor. So fetch MySQL into local name, comma, local mark. Okay. So, so whenever you say fetch, right? Fetch will read wherever the pointer is pointing. So the pointer is pointing to the first record. So what will be there in local name and local mark? You will have Tom here and you will have 25 here. Now I can do my logic with the local mark, right? If local mark is equal to mark greater than 80, that big logic I will write here. And I will decide what is the grade for the first record. Then I have to put this inside a loop, right? So I will put this inside a loop, end loop, right? So here I calculate the grade. Then when I go back and say fetch, now the cursor will be pointing to the second record. Now when you say fetch MySQL into this, what will be fetched into the cursor? What will be there in local name and mark?
Tim and 55.
Team and 50.
Tim and 85 will be there. Find the grade for Tim. Go back. Again, when you say fetch, you will be in the third record, right? So here you will have John and 67, right? For John, you find the grade. Go back. When you say fetch for the fourth time, right? Your pointer will be pointing outside the cursor. So the fourth time you say fetch, this will raise an exception. It will say you are trying to read outside the cursor, right? So there is a specific exception that is raised. It is called a not found exception. Instead of giving a number, they have given it a name, right? So this is called a not found exception. So whenever not found exception is raised, we can come out of the loop. That means we have finished reading all of this, right? And finally, there is a step 4. Don't forget that. You have to close the cursor. If you don't close the cursor, right, so nothing will happen. Close MySQL. Your program will be fine, right? But the thing is, remember, cursor is a object in memory, right? So this variable is held in memory. And if you have thousands of records, this variable will be holding thousands of records. So that means it is holding up that much memory. So when you close the cursor, the whole memory is released. So if you keep creating cursors and you forget to close them, you will soon run out of memory, right? So you should make sure that once you finish reading the cursor, you should always close it. Right. So these are the 4 steps that we need to do. Let's write this, right? And then we will see the rest of it. Let's write the first part, right? So these 4 things, let us write. So step 1. Let's copy this. Cursor underscore. So step 1 is to declare the cursor, right? So we'll say declare MySQL cursor for select name comma mark from marks. Right. So this is the first step. So now we have to open the cursor. Open MySQL. Now within the loop, right? So let me call it read loop. I'll write a simple loop. Okay, I hope you remember how to write simple loops. Read loop, loop, end loop, read loop. So here we will say fetch MySQL into local name and local mark. So that means we should have declared the local name and mark here. So declare, don't type, I'll give you time, okay? Just get the idea. So declare local name, which is of type varchar of some 20. And declare local mark, which is of type integer, right? So fetch MySQL into local name and local marks, right? So now we have to use the logic that we have already written. So if the local mark okay, I think I have replaced everything, right? Yeah, so this is what we need to do after we fetch the record, right? After you read the first record, do this, print the grade, right? Then maybe we can add the name also, concat name has, right, comma, yeah. And here finally, concat Okay. So let us hope this is fine. So this is what we need to,
In the fetch parameter, local marks, there's a spelling mistake. Ma'am. Mark we have declared. No? Yeah.
fine. Okay. So this will read the records one by one. So if you leave it as such, what will happen is when you fetch the last record, you will get an exception. Let's try this. Okay. Let's see what happens. If you run this, there was an error. All the local variable declarations should be before the cursor declaration. Okay. All right. So what is it called? Cursor underscore proc call. So it has taken each record, right? And it is saying Tom has got second class, first class, everything it has done. But finally, it is throwing an error and coming out, right? So this is not a good thing, right? So we don't want this. What we want to do is when this error happens, right? When you try to read outside the cursor, you have to handle this exception, right? So let's declare a handler to handle this exception. So this is called not found exception. It has a name also. So we will say declare do you remember how to write this? Continue handler for, we don't have a error code. Instead, we have a name for that exception. What should I do here? What should we do if this error is raised? What should we do? We have to come out of the loop, right? So we don't want to keep executing this. See, the thing is, even after you finish the loops and all, right, there will be other things to execute. So we can't leave it as an exception and then stop executing there. Instead, what we need to do is this fetch thing is put inside the loop, right? When you read beyond the last record, not found exception is raised. If this exception is raised, you have to come out of the loop and you have to continue with the rest of the commands in the code, right? So whenever this exception is raised, we have to come out of this loop. That is what we need to do. Are we clear with this?
Yes, ma'am.
How do we leave the loop? Leave, right? So right, so this is how you come out of a loop. You will say leave and the label, right? So leave this loop means come out of this loop. So that is what we have done here. So here I'm saying leave read loop, but here there is a problem. Okay. The problem is as long as you are within the loop, right? So where are we within the loop? So this is where it is starting. And where is end loop? End loop is here. Anywhere within this, I can say leave my loop. But outside of this, I cannot say read loop. Right? Because if you say read loop here, it will say, I don't know what this is. Only within this loop, you will be able to say leave read loop. Right? So now we have a problem here because the exception is being handled in this part of the code. But here I cannot say leave read loop. Right? So what we will do is we will use a variable. We will use a flag variable. Right? So let us just a variable. So I'll declare. We will call it finished, right? Or read completed or something, right? Or fetch completed or something like that. Or fetch complete, right? We will make this of type integer. And by default, we will give it a value 0. Okay. So now here what we will do is we will say set the value of fetch complete to be equal to 1. Any number, but let's say 1. So when will this variable become equal to 1? When will the variable become equal to 1? Only when the exception is raised, you will come into this. Only when you come to this, this will be 1. Until then, this is going to remain 0. Right? So let's see what happens, right? So we start executing from the beginning. So fetch complete has a value 0 inside it. So we declare our cursor, we declare the handler, right? So this is where we are starting to read. So we read the first record, do this, right? Assuming there are only 3 records in the table. Tim, 20, John. Right? Let us assume there are there are only 3 records. Okay. So now fetch maker. First, the pointer will be here. Tim and 20 will be here. We will find Tim's grade. Second time when you say fetch, John and 40 will be fetched. John's grade we will find out. Again, when you come for the third time, the pointer will be here. Pat's grade we will find. All the while, what is the value of fetch complete? What is the value? This is still 0, right? So then fourth time it comes here. What will happen? You will be outside this. Not found will be raised. So the fetch command will raise the not found exception when it tries to read for the fourth time. So MySQL will see, is there a handler for not found? Yes, there is. So it will go inside this. And here we are setting the value of fetch complete is equal to 1, right? So now here what we can do is, if the value of fetch complete, right? After every fetch, you see if the value of fetch underscore complete is equal to 1, then leave read loop. Right? So this will take care of our problem. So outside this, we have to do the step 4. We have to close maker. Right? And maybe here you can give a message, process completed or something. Process. Are we fine with the logic? Let me go through it once again, right? So Tim 20, Tom 40, and John 60, right? So at this point, At this point, we are making fetch complete as 0, right? Then open the cursor, means pointer is placed here. Read the cursor, Tom's record is read, right? What is the value of fetch complete?
0.
This is 0. So this condition is false. This is not executed. We will calculate Tom's grade. Go back, right? We will fetch Tom's record. Let's see, okay, Tom's record. What is the value of fetch complete?
0.
Still 0. So we don't do this. We will calculate Tom's grade, right? Go back, read the third record. John's record will be read. So fetch, what is the value of fetch complete? It is still 0, right? So we will not do this. We will come here and calculate John's record. When you go back and fetch for the 4th time, right? So this will take you inside this. So now the value of fetch complete becomes equal to 1, right? Now you have a continue statement here, continue here. So that means this is the statement that raised the exception. You do this and then go and execute the line below this, right? So that is what continue is all about. So we come here and we check, is the value of fetch complete equal to 1? Is it equal to 1 now?
Yes.
Yes. So that means we leave the loop. We close the cursor and we say process complete, right? So this is how, see, whatever we have learned, we have put it to use here, right? How to use if statement, how to use exceptions, how to use the loop all together and do certain activities. So this is exactly why we need a cursor. Whenever we want to do a particular activity for every record in the table, right? So you want to go. So you want to take every record from the table one by one, and you want to do some activity, right? In that case, you have to take the whole thing, put it inside a cursor, read the records one by one, right? Using the fetch command and our looping operation, right? And then take action for whatever you want to do for each and every record, right? So this is where you need cursor. It's very widely used, right? So next we will see there is a product table, right? So if you want to take stock of the products at the end of every month, so you can write a procedure like this, where you read every record in the product table one by one, look at how much quantity you have in stock, and based on that, you will take some action, right? Or you have an employee table. At the end of every 6 months, you have to calculate the bonus or the hike for every employee. So for each employee, you will take their performance, how many years of experience they have, all those details, and you will come up with the hike percentage for that employee. So this is where your cursors will come into picture. When you want to do some action for every record in the table. Okay, so let's execute this. And yeah, so now it's not giving any error, right? It is coming out cleanly. Every record we have taken, we have got the grade for every person, right? And then we say process completed and we come out of the loop, right? Do you want to try the same thing or do you want to do something else? Okay, try. And then let us move on to the same thing, right? We will use the same framework, but we will try something other than what we have done here. Like what we just talked about, right? So there is a table called um, okay, sorry. There is a table called products, right, in your database. And there is a table called orders, right? There is nothing inside orders. It's nothing inside this, right? But if you describe orders, so this is what we have, right? So what we want to do is, we want to read the records, right, one by one from the product table. Okay, from this table, we want to read the records one by one, right? So this one by one, right? And then if the quantity in hand, the quantity in stock, if it is less than 3,000, right, we want to place an order for that from the corresponding vendor, right? So this is the vendor for that product. So from this vendor, we want to place an order for this product. Okay. So what you can do is, you can write a cursor, right? Write a cursor for, right? What all do we select? We select the code. Then we select the vendor, right? And we select the quantity in hand from products. Then we will check if the quantity in stock, if QTY in stock is less than 3,000, right? Put an entry into the orders table. In orders table, order ID is auto increment, right? So we will just say insert into orders, but what all columns? Product code, vendor, and status, right? Product code, vendor, and status, right? Values. What values? This you would have selected into local variable, right? So this you would have put into some local variable. This you would have put into some local variable, right? So this code and this vendor will go into this product code and vendor, right? So local P code, local vendor, and the status we will just say immediate, right? So immediately needed. For every record, we'll do that, right? So this is what we want to do. Write a cursor to read the records from the product table one by one. We don't need to read every column, right? We need to read the P code, vendor, and quantity. Check the value of quantity. If it is less than 3,000, put an entry into the orders table, right? These values should go into the orders table. Are we clear with what we want to do?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you write it? Let's call it orders or something. And I'll copy everything from here. And we'll change only the part that is needed. So we'll copy everything and paste it here. Now we will start from where we are declaring the cursor, right? So declare cursor for select. What do we want to select? P code.
P code, P vendor, quantity in stock.
By in stock. Okay. This will remain as such, right? So we don't have to change anything here. Open, read, fetch MyCur into local P code, local P vendor, and local QTY. So that means we have to declare these, right? So local QTY will be an integer, but local P code will be varchar of 15, vendor is 50. 15 and P vendor this is varchar of 50. Local quantity is also declared, right? So now these 4 declarations are part of our cursor, right? So now we will open MyCur, read loop, fetch MyCur into local P code, local this thing, right? So this part remains unchanged, right? So now here we check if the value of local quantity is less than 3000, then what we do, insert a record into orders, right? So we don't want everything. We want product code, vendor, and status. Product code, vendor, and status. Values, local P code, right? So local P vendor. These 2 values we have to insert. And the status, we will just say immediate, right? If you want, you can add one more condition saying if the local quantity, right? So local quantity is between 2000 and 3000. Local, not this. No, this is fine, right? Or let's make this, if this is less than 2000, right? We need it immediately. Otherwise, if the local quantity is between 2000 and local quantities between 2000 and 3000, right? So then also we'll insert into the orders table. But status, we will say needed soon, not immediate, but this will be needed soon. So something like that. right? So that is everything else remains the same, right? So we don't have to do anything else. Let's see if this is fine. Apply, close.
Ma'am, the column name in stock S is capital. Declare MySQL Cursor for select P code P vendor. Quantity in stock S has to be a capital one. QTY in S is capital.
That doesn't matter.
Column, yeah. Okay.
It's case independent, no?
Yeah.
Other than that, I hope. So select. So at the moment, there is nothing in orders, right? So we will call our method. Sorry. So now if you check, there are 35 rows, right? So some are needed immediately, some are needed soon, right? So out of some 110 records in the date in products table, products table has around 110 records, right? Out of that, some 35 records have gone below stock, below the level. So we want to order those, right? So now you can maybe write another store procedure, which will take each record from here, each record from here, right? And then place an order with this vendor for a certain quantity or something, right? So this product, you can place an order from this vendor, this product from this vendor, and so on. Okay. So this is why you use your stored procedures, where you want to do something repeatedly. So once you write this procedure, you can run this at the end of every month, right? You can see which all products have gone below the stock level, and you can restock it, right? So you can place an order with the vendor and repeat the process every month. So you write the procedure only once, run it at the end of every month. Okay.